Hello, fellow humans. My name is Vlad Bunea, and this is Economy for Life. These days, I am in a constant experimentation mode on this channel. I feel strongly that the anti-capitalist message of the degrowth kind needs to get out there before it is too late. There are many channels that are critical of capitalism, but very few, if any, discuss both the ecological dimension and the class dimension of capitalism. And even fewer talk about the fundamental causal forces of capitalism without using the language of Marx, for example. I think both the ecological dimension and the class dimension have to be addressed at the same time and always connected to each other. So far, only degrowth and eco-socialism have done that. For today, I have picked for debunking a pragmatic French libertarian, an optimistic techno-humanist by the name of Brivel. He really likes what Elon Musk has to say, so let's take a look. Elon Musk has said something about resource allocation that really struck me. Essentially, beyond a certain level of wealth, money is no longer for consumption. It's for capital allocation. That statement changes everything. This libertarian bootlicker forgot to tell us the difference between money and capital, the definition of capital, and what allocation is. The first statement contains a lot of assumptions. In the business world, there's no difference between money and capital. As a way of talking in simple terms, you can read books like this for a full history of the word capital. In real and legal terms, money is not always capital and vice versa. If you have cash in your wallet or in your checking account, that doesn't mean it is capital. Capital, in my analysis, is property used for the purpose of the accumulation of stuff that can be valued in money on a market, including money itself. Capital exists only in a scripted form. If it's not scripted, it cannot be capital. Scripted means it is written down as law or as an algorithm or as corporate directives or contracts and so on. So when Brivel writes that money is about capital accumulation, he confuses the terms. Economics, at its core, is simply a matter of allocation. You have finite resources and infinite uses. Who decides where that goes? Allocation means to distribute according to a plan. So yes, economics should be about the distribution of resources to satisfy the needs of humans. In fact, the word economics comes from the Greek oikonomikos, which means household management. The next mistake is to assume that there are infinite uses of finite resources. In theory, yes, we can combine the resources of Earth in many ways, but the combinations are not infinite. We have the limits of physics. Any use of resource produces heat. That heat has to go somewhere. It goes as waste or as a global warming. We have done already so much extraction of resources that we have caused the warming of the planet without precedent. We have caused the artificial extinction of life. If we go extinct, there will be nobody left to do any extraction of resources. So that's when capitalism will stop by itself. The assumption that there are infinite uses for our resources is just plain wrong and deluded. In case it is not clear, to delude means to cause to hold a false belief, to deceive thoroughly. That's what Brivel did. The question who decides where what goes suggests that humans require a system of decision-making for this allocation of resources. This is largely true because humans have evolved as social creatures. Language has allowed humans to coordinate hunting, gathering, wars, rituals, and celebrations. All these require decisions and has made humans the most cooperative species in the history of the planet. You can learn about this in these two great books. Now get ready for a spicy stew of ignorance and outright silliness. Imagine a school playground, 100 children, packs of Pokemon cards randomly distributed. You let things play out. Very quickly, an order emerges. The skilled players accumulate rare cards. The collectors sort them. The negotiators find deals. No one planned it. And yet, every card ends up in the hands of one who gets the most value from it. The system maximizes the overall happiness of the playground. That's the invisible hand. Whoa, hold your horses, or as the French would say, on se calme. In this little paragraph, our pragmatic libertarian makes a lot of assumptions, but he doesn't tell us what they are. I think this is despicable manipulation. The most outrageous assumption is that this dude thinks human nature works only in the way that justifies capitalism. He uses children as an example to claim this point. Hey, this is how humans behave naturally, therefore we must accept capitalism as the correct system for the allocation of resources. His ignorance also claims that only a specific order can emerge, whether there are children or not. That's completely wrong. We learn from great studies such as this, and more recently such as this, that humans have organized themselves in many different kinds of societies, from the most hierarchical to the most egalitarian, with no leaders. And guess which kinds of civilizations lasted much longer? The egalitarian ones, where competition between individuals was not a thing, where cooperation and the endurance of the group was the most important idea of that civilization. The sentence, "the system maximizes the overall happiness of the playground," is a direct reference to the philosophy of utilitarianism of Jeremy Bentham and others, which says that the role of the moral code is to increase the utility or the usefulness of resources for as many people as possible, making as many people as possible happy. The utilitarian philosophy can justify horrible crimes and injustices under the excuse that these so-called sacrifices may actually increase the well-being of more people in the future. Really, is suffering in the present a guarantee of happiness in the future? Would you sacrifice yourself in the present to allow unborn children to be happier in the future? What if your suffering in the present may contribute to the suffering of unborn children? Now bringing the teacher. She finds it unfair. Leo has 50 cards, Tom has 3. She confiscates them, redistributes them, and imposes equality. 3 immediate effects. The good players stop playing. What's the point? The bad ones no longer have any reason to improve. They'll get their share. Trading collapses. The court is equal and dead. She has maximized equality. She has destroyed happiness. Here's when hardcore libertarian ideology makes a move. First, the word confiscates. This manipulates us to think that the cards were earned fairly in the first place. It's important to distinguish between property and possession. They are not the same thing. Property is a right, and always a right, that emerges in a social context and is built on excluding everybody else from accessing the object of property. If there's no right or social context, there's no property. The children were just playing. They did not have property rights established. They may have not even agreed on the rules of the game. To assume that the imposition of equality by doing confiscation of possession is misleading. We need property rights first before we even talk about confiscation. Property rights means a social contract. The libertarian assumption here is wrong. The next wrong assumption is that the accumulation of possessions is the primary incentive for the players of the game. Why would they stop playing if their cards are taken away? How do we know that was what motivated them? Maybe playing together was the motivation, not the quantity of cards accumulated. Brivel makes a libertarian anti-social projection. Equality might as well be the number one incentive for playing a game of trade. History is full of these examples. Happiness may as well be more equality, not less equality. Brivel has not proven that happiness comes from less equality. The teacher's problem is that she can't access the information the school collectively possessed. This is the problem of Mises's economic calculus, formulated in 1920. The USSR tried to solve it for 70 years with Gosplan. The result: shortages, queues, collapse. Not because the Soviets were stupid, but because the problem is mathematically unsolvable in a centralized system. Of course, the USSR is demonized as the bad example for collective organization, but the USSR has also done pretty well in many aspects. Life expectation was high. They had the first man in space. Let us also remember that all capitalist corporations are super centralized systems. Everything is decided at the top of the pyramid. The board of directors gives power to the CEO to run the corporation as an absolute king. All decisions and planning are centralized at the top. So this is a super weak and very stupid critique coming from libertarians. Capitalism is all about centralizing decisions at the top. When Musk has $200 billion, he doesn't spend it, he allocates it. SpaceX, Starlink, Neuralink, XAI, every dollar is bet on the future. And he has a track record. PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX. He has demonstrated that he knows how to identify immense problems and allocate resources to them with spectacular returns. Elon Musk does not have 200 billion or 400 billion or 800 or whatever in cash. That is the market value of his stocks. That's it. Those stocks can be used as collateral to take loans in cash or collateral for various investment schemes. Stocks are not cash, but stocks are property as much as cash is property. Stocks have real value, just like cash. Elon Musk has not earned that value through individual work. He has accumulated that value only because capitalism works with joint stock corporations that operate with the one share, one vote principle. Property, which are the shares, are linked with power, which are the votes, in proportion. Elon Musk is not smarter than Albert Einstein. He just uses corporate law. There is zero merit in that. If proportionality between property and power was abolished, we would not have an Elon Musk. And I argue that this principle of proportionality has done much more harm than good. We don't need proportionality to have innovations. The internet, the GPS, and many more technologies have been invented not by capitalists. The state also has a track record. Hospitals are collapsing, education is declining, debt is exploding, and public services are deteriorating despite constantly increasing budgets. The market identifies the good allocators. Politics identifies the good communicators. This is true. Public services are collapsing, not because the state does a bad job at it. The private sector is also bad at them. Budgets for public services are not increasing, they are decreasing. Budgets for military are increasing. And of course, that does not help citizens get better health, better education, or better public transportation. The market is very bad at allocating money for healthcare and education. The best example is the United States, where a private healthcare sector is wasting much more money on worse results than in Canada, where we have a public healthcare system. If we want better public services, we need to put more money in it, not less, and we must remove public services from the market logic. Healthcare, education, and public transportation should not be businesses. We need more medical staff and more hospitals to decrease waiting times, not more private hospitals. Profit isn't the end goal, it's a signal. It says you've allocated scarce resources to a use that people value enough to pay for. The greater the profit, the greater the value creation. When Starlink is profitable, it means millions of people in rural areas finally have internet access. When a government department runs a deficit, it means it consumes more than it produces. One creates, the other destroys, and that's called redistribution. No, no, and no. Profit is a measure that a company is capable of selling its products for more money than it spends. It has nothing to do with value. A company may be super profitable and may offer a shitty product or service. McDonald's, fossil fuel companies, Facebook, Palantir. Value is something that is subjective by nature. Internet may be valuable in the rural areas if people living there satisfy their needs of communication. Internet may also be a crap service when it leads to increased anxiety because of social media platforms. Considering profit as being equal to value is a huge libertarian delusion and manipulation. Also, governments are not businesses. They do not have to make a profit. Governments that can issue their own sovereign currency, such as the United States and Canada, can issue as much currency as they want without caring about making a so-called profit. Thinking that governments have to balance their books is stupid and suggests a massive misunderstanding of how money works. Very briefly, governments spend money to satisfy the needs of their citizens, not to make a profit. Or at least it should be that way. The primary role of taxes is to regulate economic behavior, to incentivize certain behaviors and disincentivize other behaviors. It is not to have an income for the budget, especially when government can issue money for itself whenever it wants. In our societies, there are two categories of actors: entrepreneurs and bureaucrats. The entrepreneur takes a personal risk to identify a problem, mobilize resources, and create a solution. If they're wrong, they lose. If they're right, their customers win, their employees win, their suppliers win, and the state collects taxes. They're the basic unit of human progress. No, no, and no. In advanced economies, there are many categories of actors. If we just ask Karl Marx, for example, he would say we had two classes, capitalists and workers, those who own capital and make a profit, and those who do not own capital and work for a salary. Everyone takes personal risks, both capitalists and workers. Capitalists risk of going bankrupt and workers risk losing their jobs. I would argue that workers carry much more risk in a capitalist economy because they cannot afford to go for weeks, months, and years without an income, while capitalists risk only their business, not their personal property and livelihoods. Really, are libertarians that stupid? The bureaucrat takes no personal risk. His salary is guaranteed. At best, he maintains an existing privileged position. At worst, he destroys it through excessive regulation, flawed force allocation, and perverse incentives that discourage those who produce. But in no case does he create anything. No salary is guaranteed. Bureaucrats can lose their jobs too. Look at the great job done by Musk at the Department of Government Efficiency that created incredible chaos and achieved nothing. When a libertarian says executive regulation or perverse incentives, they mean that their freedom to use proportionality and undemocratic hierarchies in their businesses is affected. Their freedom to pursue greed is affected. Oh no, have pity for libertarians. I challenge all capitalists to prove that they do not pursue capital accumulation by using proportionality and hierarchies. They have to prove what they do is for the greater good first and not personal rewards. Look at the last 50 years. iPhone, public internet, SpaceX, Tesla, Google, Amazon, Stripe, mRNA, ChatGPT, all private inventions driven by entrepreneurs, funded by venture capital. Not a single government ministry invented anything that changed your daily life. No, no, and again, no. These are complete lies. The internet was developed through US government agencies like DARPA. Early networking technologies were publicly funded long before commercialization. The GPS was created by the US military and later opened for civilian use, enabling everything from Google Maps to ride-sharing. Research behind touchscreens was funded by public grants, including work supported by the National Science Foundation and other government bodies. The voice assistant Siri originated from a DARPA-funded AI project called Kalo before being commercialized by Apple. Many breakthrough drugs trace back to publicly funded research, especially via the National Institute of Health. Private firms often build on the space to bring products to market. Early-stage research in these fields has often been funded through public research grants and national labs. Libertarians should shut up. France has become the world's laboratory for bureaucratic access. Public spending represents 57% of GDP, an absolute record. A sprawling administration and a tax system that penalizes wealth creation have resulted in a decline compared to the United States, Germany, and Switzerland. There has been a brain drain, deindustrialization, and a skyrocketing debt. Public spending is not a bad idea in itself if the spending goes towards what matters for citizens: healthcare, education, transportation, clean air, clean waters, social housing. These things create wealth. The military does not create wealth. Higher profits for corporations do not create wealth. More fossil fuels do not create wealth. Libertarians like to talk about wealth, but they don't tell you what it is. We must call out their lies and delusions. You don't want brain drain? Pay workers more. What kind of industrialization? For trains and buses or luxury yachts and personal cars? Skyrocketing debt? Whose debt? Someone's debt is always someone else's credit. When we see claims that there is too much debt, we must also ask the question, whoa, if there's so much debt, it means there's a lot of credit for someone. Who is that someone? And the worst part is that this misallocation is self-reinforcing. The more the government collects, the less entrepreneurs create. The less they create, the smaller the tax base. The more the government goes into debt and taxes. A perfect negative feedback loop. The teacher thinks she's helping, but every year the school produces less. Wrong and stupid. The debt of the government is the credit of the private sector. If anything, a libertarian should want more government debt, not less, because that means the private sector has more investments into debts issued by the government. Entrepreneurs are motivated by profit. They can make profits even from buying bonds issued by the government. So what's the problem here? Entrepreneurs want to get away with even more money, to have more freedom to squeeze profits from all sorts of activities by paying workers even less, polluting even more, and making the world a battle of everyone for himself. That's a very sad and gloomy vision of the human condition. It is a despicable value proposition that worships individualism and selfishness and ignores the fact that humans have survived as species so long because they have evolved cooperation. In our societies, it is always the entrepreneurs who drive civilization forward. Bureaucrats, at best, maintain a privileged position. At worst, they destroy it. No society has ever progressed by taxing its creators to subsidize its managers. This is monumentally stupid because it simply indicates ignorance of history. What is civilization? What is forward? Was Albert Einstein an entrepreneur, or Louis Pasteur, or Jonas Salk, who developed the first polio vaccine in the 1950s, then gave it away essentially for free? When taxation was the highest, Modern countries were actually the most prosperous and more equal in their entire history. The question is never who has how much. It's who best allocates the next unit of resource to maximize humanity's future. The answer has never changed in 200 years. It's not the bureaucrats. I have a suggestion. Let us make corporations owned by their workers. Let the employees decide democratically what to produce, how much, and for what price. Let the employees decide their own salaries and those of their managers and executives. Let employees select their managers democratically. Let us abolish proportionality and unelected hierarchies and put instead one worker, one vote, and full economic democracy. Let us replace the profit motive with the sufficiency and well-being motive, where infinite accumulation of property and power is abolished in favor of cooperation, equality, conviviality, and harmony with the natural world. What would you choose? The ignorant, selfish vision of libertarians, or an economy for life where there will be enough for everyone forever? Thank you for watching. Subscribe to learn more about how we can do better than capitalism. Increase the peace.